I still remember the exact moment I realized just how wrong I was. There I sat, in my first-year psychology class, confidently explaining to a fellow student why her anxiety was all in her head and how she just needed to think positive thoughts. Then our professor began discussing the intricate neuroscience of anxiety disorders. As she detailed the complex interplay between the amygdala, cortisol levels, and neural pathways, my confident smile slowly faded. With each new piece of information, I sank deeper into my chair, realizing just how much damage my oversimplified advice could have caused. This experience led me to discover one of psychology's most fascinating phenomena, the Dunning-Kruger effect. This cognitive bias explains why people with limited knowledge or expertise in a specific domain tend to overestimate their abilities. In fact, according to recent studies across 46 countries, this overconfidence isn't just common, it's nearly universal. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very moment I felt most qualified to give psychological advice was precisely when I knew the least about psychology. But why does this happen? Why do we often feel most confident when we know the least? This paradox isn't just about psychology students giving bad advice. It affects doctors making diagnoses, pilots assessing their abilities, and business leaders making crucial decisions. Recent studies show that in medical fields, about 32% of healthcare providers can be characterized as overconfident in their diagnostic abilities, while 37% overestimate their effort in patient consultations. As we explore this fascinating quirk of human psychology, you might recognize moments in your own life where you've fallen into this trap. Because here's the thing about the Dunning-Kruger effect. Understanding it requires first accepting that none of us are immune to it. And that revelation, as uncomfortable as it might be, is exactly where real learning begins. Picture yourself on day one of learning to play chess. You've just learned how the pieces move. Already, you might feel pretty good about your abilities. After all, how hard could it be? Now fast forward to after you've played 100 games, studied multiple strategies, and lost to experienced players. Suddenly, you realize just how much you don't know. This pattern, where beginners overestimate their abilities while experts underestimate theirs, was formally documented in 1999 by psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger. Their groundbreaking study revealed a fascinating paradox about human confidence and competence. In their original research, Dunning and Kruger tested participants across multiple domains: humor, logical reasoning, grammar, and social skills. What they discovered was remarkable. Those who performed in the bottom 25% consistently estimated themselves to be above average, believing they performed better than 63% of their peers. Meanwhile, top performers consistently underestimated their abilities, assuming others were just as competent as they were. Recent studies of healthcare providers found that 32% can be characterized as overconfident in their diagnostic accuracy, while 37% overestimate their effort in patient consultations. In the business world, this effect contributes significantly to startup failures, with 42% of products failing because they don't meet market demands, often due to founders' overconfidence in their understanding of customer needs. The explanation for this paradox lies in what psychologists call metacognition, our ability to think about our own thinking. When we're novices in any field, we lack not just knowledge of the subject, but also the knowledge to evaluate our own competence. It's like trying to judge how well you speak a foreign language when you don't know enough of that language to recognize your own mistakes. This creates what I call the double curse of incompetence. Not only do we perform poorly, but we also lack the expertise needed to recognize our poor performance. It's why amateur investors might feel most confident about their trading strategies right before losing significant money, or why first-year medical students might feel more certain about their diagnostic abilities than experienced doctors. Studies show that doctors incorrectly diagnose between 10 and 15% of their patients, partly due to overconfidence in their diagnostic abilities. This isn't because these professionals are careless. It's because the very nature of human psychology makes it difficult for us to accurately assess our own competence. Understanding the Dunning-Kruger effect isn't about deflating confidence or promoting self-doubt. Instead, it's about recognizing that true expertise comes with a deep appreciation for the complexity of a field. As Socrates famously observed, the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. Understanding the Dunning-Kruger effect becomes clearer when we break it down into 4 distinct stages of learning, each representing a different relationship between confidence and competence. Let's explore these stages through the lens of learning to perform surgery, where the stakes couldn't be higher. Imagine a first-year medical student who has just completed their first virtual surgery simulation. They might think, "This isn't so hard, it's just like a sophisticated video game." This is the peak of what psychologists playfully call Mount Stupid. At this stage, we don't know enough to recognize how much we don't know. According to studies of medical students, during this stage, those scoring less than 50% on practical exams often predict they'll score around 69%, an overestimation of 32 percentage points. Now our medical student begins their residency. Suddenly, they're faced with real procedures, real complications, and real consequences. Their confidence plummets as they realize just how much they need to learn. Research on surgical residents shows that during this stage, self-assessment scores drop dramatically, often below actual performance levels. This is the valley of despair, where we become painfully aware of our limitations. As our resident gains experience, they begin to develop real surgical skills. Each procedure requires intense concentration, but they can perform them successfully. Brain scans of surgeons at this stage show increased activity in the motor cortex during procedures, indicating the development of specialized neural pathways. Finally, after years of practice, our surgeon reaches a level where many procedures become second nature. Neurological studies show that experienced surgeons actually display less overall brain activity during procedures than novices, indicating greater neural efficiency. At this stage, competence becomes automatic, but interestingly, self-assessment often becomes more modest. Studies show that top-performing surgeons tend to slightly underestimate their abilities, rating themselves at the 70th percentile when they're actually in the 90th. In software development, programmers often feel most confident about their coding abilities right after learning their first programming language. Studies of optometry students found that self-assessment accuracy was generally poor across all learning objectives, ranging from 26 to 31% accuracy, with the majority of students showing inaccurate self-assessment. In business, entrepreneurs show similar patterns. Research indicates that about 16% of business leaders can be characterized as generally overconfident, leading to significant strategic mistakes. This overconfidence tends to peak early in their careers, then gradually adjusts as they gain real-world experience. The key insight here isn't just that we go through these stages, but that recognizing which stage we're in can help us navigate our learning journey more effectively. When we understand that the drop in confidence during stage 2 is normal and necessary, it becomes easier to push through. Remember, the goal isn't to avoid Mount Stupid. Everyone starts there. The goal is to recognize when we're on it and be ready for the journey down into the valley of despair, knowing that's where real learning begins. The consequences of the Dunning-Kruger effect extend far beyond individual embarrassment or minor mistakes. In professional settings, this cognitive bias can have profound and sometimes devastating impacts on both organizations and human lives. Let's start in the medical field, where overconfidence can have life or death consequences. Recent studies paint a sobering picture. About 32% of healthcare providers can be characterized as overconfident in their diagnostic accuracy, while 37% overestimate the effort they put into patient consultations. Even more concerning, doctors incorrectly diagnose between 10 and 15% of their patients, with overconfidence being a significant contributing factor. In the financial sector, the impact is measured in dollars and cents, often billions of them. The phenomenon helps explain why inexperienced investors often feel most confident right before making catastrophic trading decisions. This pattern becomes particularly evident in startup failures, where 42% of products fail because they don't meet market demand, frequently due to founders' overconfidence in their understanding of customer needs. Studies across 46 countries have shown that this effect isn't just an individual phenomenon. It can infect entire organizational cultures. When leaders overestimate their abilities, they often fail to recognize expertise in their team members, leading to poor resource allocation and missed opportunities. Consider the contrasting approaches of novice versus experienced leaders. Brain imaging studies reveal that novice decision-makers show increased activity in areas associated with emotional response and decreased activity in regions responsible for critical analysis. Meanwhile, experienced leaders show the opposite pattern: more activation in analytical regions and less in emotional ones. Recent research in aviation found that less experienced pilots often overestimate their ability to handle difficult weather conditions, while veteran pilots tend to be more cautious in their assessment of challenging situations. What makes this especially challenging in organizational settings is the competence paradox. Those most qualified to make decisions are often the most hesitant to do so, while those least qualified tend to be the most eager to take charge. Studies of surgical teams provide a striking example. Surgeons with the highest actual skill levels tend to rate themselves at the 70th percentile, while those with lower skill levels often place themselves in the 90th percentile. When organizations promote individuals based on confidence rather than competence, they risk creating what I call confidence cascades. Situations where overconfident leaders promote other overconfident individuals, creating a cycle of poor decision-making that can be difficult to break. Organizations that actively work to counteract the Dunning-Kruger effect through structured feedback systems and objective performance metrics show significantly better outcomes. For instance, medical institutions that implement rigorous peer review processes see a marked decrease in diagnostic errors. The key lies not in eliminating confidence, which is necessary for decisive action, but in calibrating it against reality. This requires creating environments where expertise is valued over bravado, and where questioning one's assumptions is seen as a strength rather than a weakness. Breaking free from the Dunning-Kruger effect isn't about destroying confidence, it's about calibrating it. Let me share some powerful strategies that research has shown can help us develop more accurate self-awareness and genuine expertise. First, we need to recognize the warning signs that we might be affected. One clear indicator is what I call the explanation test. If you can't explain a concept in simple terms to someone else, you probably don't understand it as well as you think you do. This isn't just folk wisdom, it's backed by cognitive science. When we attempt to explain something, we activate different neural pathways than when we simply think we know it. Brain imaging studies show that experts actually display lower activity levels in certain brain regions when performing tasks, indicating greater neural efficiency than novices who show more scattered brain activity. Another powerful tool is what psychologists call metacognitive monitoring, essentially thinking about how we think. Studies show that participants who perform poorly on cognitive reflection tests tend to overestimate their performance by a factor of more than 3. The most effective antidote to the Dunning-Kruger effect is deliberate practice combined with immediate, accurate feedback. Consider the medical field, where studies of surgical residents show that structured feedback dramatically improves the accuracy of self-assessment. Without feedback, about 35% of medical students overestimate their performance. But perhaps counterintuitively, one of the most powerful strategies is learning to embrace uncertainty. Research across multiple fields shows that experts are actually more comfortable saying, "I don't know," than novices. In fact, studies of healthcare providers found that those who regularly express uncertainty and seek second opinions have significantly lower rates of diagnostic errors than those who express high confidence in their initial judgments. Here are some practical steps you can take. 1. Seek out expert criticism, not just peer feedback. 2. Document your predictions and review them later. 3. Practice explaining complex concepts to others. 4. Regularly reassess your assumptions. 5. Cultivate relationships with people who will challenge your thinking. Remember, the goal isn't to eliminate confidence, but to align it with competence. Studies of effective leaders show that those who maintain a learning mindset while acknowledging uncertainty tend to make better decisions than those who project unwavering certainty. The most powerful shift happens when we start viewing uncertainty not as a weakness to be hidden, but as a tool for growth. Research in educational psychology shows that students who embrace uncertainty and view challenges as learning opportunities consistently outperform those who prioritize appearing knowledgeable. Think of expertise like a mountain range rather than a single peak. Just when you think you've reached the summit, you realize there are higher peaks beyond. This perspective doesn't diminish your achievements. It enriches them by acknowledging the vast landscape of knowledge still to explore. Understanding the Dunning-Kruger effect isn't just about recognizing a quirk of human psychology. It's about transforming how we approach learning, decision-making, and self-assessment. As we've seen, this cognitive bias affects everyone from medical professionals to business leaders, and its implications ripple through every domain of human knowledge and skill. Think about a skill you're currently learning. At which stage of the Dunning-Kruger effect do you believe you are, and why? Remember those 4 stages we discussed: unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, and unconscious competence. Be honest with yourself. Are you perhaps standing on Mount Stupid or working your way through the Valley of Despair? How might the Dunning-Kruger effect influence important decisions in fields like medicine or engineering? Consider the cascading consequences when overconfidence meets high-stakes situations. What systems or safeguards might help prevent potentially catastrophic outcomes? What strategies could you implement in your own life to avoid the overconfidence trap? Think about your decision-making process and how you might incorporate more feedback and objective measurement into your self-assessment. Finally, how does understanding the Dunning-Kruger effect change your approach to learning new skills? Does recognizing this pattern make you more cautious about your initial confidence, or more persistent when facing the inevitable dip in confidence that comes with deeper learning? These questions aren't just rhetorical, they're invitations to engage with one of the most fundamental aspects of human learning and development. Because in the end, the greatest expertise often begins with three simple words: I don't know.